Okay, hi guys. So I am going to make another incoherent video about some of the thoughts and revelations I have been having lately. Um, so it's not completely coherent, but hopefully it will still be useful. Um, so I saw this video recently. I've been watching a lot and analyzing circumstances in my life and elsewhere. But this video framed things in terms of these two axes um, of personality. And it's basically saying that, we have this perceptual axis. So our concrete sensations and our intuitive abstractions based upon those perceptions, which is very fitting with how the actual brain is organized, with concrete information coming into sensory cortices, more in the rear of the brain, and then being projected and abstracted towards higher order processing, towards the front pole of the brain. So that makes sense. It's all very consistent, and saying that then we have this identity or decision axis, which is balanced between rational thinking and emotional feeling processing, which again is very consistent with the organization of the brain between the left hemisphere, which is specialized in rational processing, and the right hemisphere, which is more specialized in intuitive and often creative and emotional processing. It's more complicated than that, but that's what I'll say for now. So, what was an interesting revelation to me, to understand, has to do with how everyone has their primary function, and this is something we can generally all understand very well. We have our go-to way of processing, whether it's perceptual or identity based. As an INFP, that primary function is introverted feeling. So we are primarily focused on establishing our individual identity. So that's one axis, which, just for example, so like me as an INFP, that leads with that introverted feeling. And then at the other end of that axis is the inferior function of extroverted thinking. So that function is very lopsided with this primary function. It will be the fourth in the stack, the lowest in the stack, and the least developed. So it's weird as an INFP because we have this very intricately well established sense of personal identity, but in many ways that is very polarized from our community or our group identity, which, no matter how comfortable and strong we are within ourselves, we will end up having just relatively this weakness of how that identity relates to and has efficacy in the community. So that's part of it. So that's the first axis in this case. The judging or identity axis. But then the second and third function for an INFP will be on this perceptual axis. So the second function being extroverted intuition, and the third function being introverted sensing. So we're going to have strong abilities to understand and take in relationships of everything that's going on around us, and to explore and develop that. And then we take that in and process it not only based on our sense of identity, but all of our former concrete experiences to look for consistencies. So we have this strong connection to real relationships that are going on all around us. And then we have a strong sense of balance and consistency between that and what we have previously experienced. And then, of course, we resolve that very well with our personal identity. But then in the back, there's this extroverted thinking where we then need to operate on this reality and do something with it and change it. And that's something that's a little harder for us to decide. We don't want to threaten our identity or waste our energy or throw off anything else. It's just not, it's not our focus. It puts us a bit on the outside of things, just waiting to figure out what to do, really. Because we want to do something that really counts, really matters to us, is not frivolous or disingenuous or anything but perfection. So what I find interesting is this concept that generally the secondary and tertiary axis to back up your primary function is pretty well balanced between these two functions. Meaning that if those are perceptual functions, if your secondary and tertiary axis is perceptual, then you're pretty well grounded in reality. You at least have a pretty realistic sense of what's really happening. You might either struggle with this lopsidedness in either your personal identity or your group identity. But if that secondary axis is a judging identity axis and you're leading with perception, then you're going to have a lot of imbalances in your perception. And even though you might have some certainty in your individual some balance between your individual identity and the group identity, so you're good with the group and yourself, you might have a very skewed sense of things. And like so many things in this theory, this is why I keep pursuing this because it's such a revelation to me, because I will encounter types like an ENFP, for instance. I spend lots of time around them, and they always just very naturally fall in this balance between their social identity and themselves. They don't worry about it too much, and they have very strong intuitive perceptions, but at the same time, like, to me it seems that they can often completely lose touch with what's actually happening. And this is something that's very prevalent, and it fits very well into the idea of people who they balance their group identity well, but those tend to be the same people who, if you really look at their perceptions and their motivations, they might understand something or see something as being something very different from what it actually is. Like, they can be very happy to take away this skewed, colorful picture and base their identity and their decisions on it. And it works within the group, but it's not always real. It can be just like messed up or confusing, or I mean, like, I don't know what to say. Just it's not an actual perception. So to me, I'll probably talk more about it because I think there's a lot to explore there, but in a lot of ways it's relieving, and explains a lot of frustrations, but it's also very frustrating to think that these social groups, because of the way that the mind is constructed, would form based upon people balancing themselves with the group, but then that all coming out of sort of this like delusional construct, that mutual construct that people agree upon or disagree upon. And like, that is just, it's weird as hell for me to think about how then the people who are unsure of where they belong in the community and are maybe not as effectual, or are maybe not as sure of what to do with their own identity and motivations, are the ones who have the real, true perception of reality. And if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know exactly what I mean. How many people will just get it even if you disagree. Clearly their perceptions are grounded. That's not the problem. But then many people just, every little thing, like, they will get caught up on and see it as being like some ridiculous thing that it's not. And INFPs, we might get caught up on a lot of things, but that has to do with, oh, hey, like, this is a violation of our moral values, or hey, this is not correct or consistent, or hey, like, this is unnecessary. We get caught up on details, but it's not coming from inaccurate perceptual abilities. it's coming from more of a deep understanding of what that thing means in context. But for people with skewed perceptions, it might be that everything just seems weird and off and frustrating, and they react to things and are so certain about how they feel and think about them, and just sort of go along in their identity and don't question it and operate just fine. And it's so strange to me because it seems like it's just such a delusion, just such like a mindless, I don't know, like it's weird because I wish I could have that strong sense of identity. I wish it was easy and effortless to operate relative to the community instead of such a strenuous and frustrating process. But at the same time, I don't know like how you can live in a world like that. I can't even fathom like how that can even function at all. Like it's something I have to think about more deeply. But at the same time, other than INFPs, which we have to be careful not to skew ourselves with isolation or frustration with the group. But at least in addition to having those strong perceptions, we also have a very strong sense of what people are really feeling, what their motivations are, why they're doing what they're doing, what's going on inside of them. So I think it makes us very unique in that we have a very balanced intake of what's going on, and we know what's going on deep underneath the surface, maybe even better than the people who are operating do. And yet we're constantly demeaned and misunderstood and underestimated because we're just kind of cute and we keep quiet about it and we're sweet and we're gentle and we don't get in people's way. So that's where I'm working now to develop that power in the community. And I've gotten there before, and I know that when you can get there, it just unleashes all of this potential, this infinite potential within the INFP. So I probably better end this, but one more thing. I was just going to say like another thought. So I'm thinking about this relative to the INTP personality type. And though they have fairly clear perceptions, I find that INTPs, even though they have these highly vivid and creative and intelligent and rich cognitive trees of knowledge and relationships that they build, that they're still very happy to, as TI does, take its own conclusions away and then ignore anything else. So if they think something doesn't fit into how they rationalize or their like internal understanding of things or their tastes, then they can be very dismissive of it too, that they, I feel, can skew their perceptions in that way, in like, first of all, like not having any sort of basis of what people's internal motivations and the subtleties of internal emotions are like, but also to like lack the capacity to even listen to and consider an alternate rational viewpoint, which as an INFP, you know, I would never exclude another viewpoint or another conclusion. I would carefully weigh and integrate everything because I wouldn't want to miss any possibility. I wouldn't want to falsely categorize things as either valuable or valueless when they exist along a complex spectrum, and they need to be put in their very precise place. And I'm very disappointed with the INTP to see that TI sitting there and boxing things in artificial categories where they don't belong and excluding information. So to me, it's kind of a waste of having balanced perception. So I'm wondering at this point, you know, what type even, like, I don't know how this sounds, but what type even comes close to being anything like the reality that an INFP actually experiences in understanding the world. Like, are we really that different? Is it really that difficult to actually be in touch with what's actually going on? Is it so mysterious to everyone? Yeah, and sorry, this is one last random thing, but just, this is not a personal thing, but just a video I watched of an INTP considering INFPs, and saying that, oh well, you know, INFPs, they just want to go and pick fruit off of the trees and like just get rid of corporations. And he was like, well, you know, that sounds kind of nice, but I like having conveniences like bathrooms and restaurants and stuff. And that was like more or less like his take on the INFP personality relative to INTPs. And like I see that this all of the time when other types type INFPs. Like I saw this ENFP and they're basically like, oh well, you know, INFPs, like, they can't actually engage in debate and they don't get out of the house and they are like not very social and blah 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 blah. And like an INFJ description of an INFP I saw where they're saying, oh well, you know, INFPs, they live in the moment, but they can never have a vision or extrapolate into the future or, you know, develop real real theories about things like the INFJ can. And like to me, so many, like all of these descriptions, like they're basically just like this like haughty denigration of what we really are through the lens of a personality that is like using its ego to patch its blind perceptual spots. You know, INFPs cannot be so oversimplified like this. You know, we're not just shut-ins who can't do anything and don't like we're not just like these like weak like hippies. Like no one's saying that you can't have a restroom or conveniences. We're not trying to just completely disengage from the community, and we don't just live in the moments. We have these deep visions and plans for the world in this infinite sense, and we consider every possibility, and we think of what is the grandest thing we can do that encompasses not only all of the future but the present moment as well. And we don't want to get rid of corporations so we can become heathens. We want everyone to live in tune with a higher ideological sense of things and not be enslaving their mind and their soul to a power that has no depth and no context and no soulfulness to it. And we are highly theoretical. We are working out incredibly complex theoretical models. I don't know. It's not, none of it is real. None of it is a genuine evaluation. Like always, this is why I call it arrogance, but this is why I believe so much in INFPs, and why, as frustrating as it is, this is what I want to be, because as hard as it is to actually accomplish what I want to accomplish, at least I know that who I am and what things are and what's going on and where I belong and how I feel, and I can appreciate it and enjoy it every step along the way. I have all of those things. And if I didn't have any one of them, everything would be messed up and there would be no point and everything would be a waste. So there's this piece that's the struggle. So how to relate all of this order to all of the chaos out there and what to do with it. But I'd rather that be the struggle than anything else. So criticize me for this perspective. Balance me out if you think that I'm off. But thanks so much. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you guys next time.